What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, where we're continuing our series with Sandbox founders. Today, I have Blake sitting next to me, who's appreciative enough to join us on today's episode. A little bit about Blake. He is the co-founder and CEO of Buster, an AI-powered analytics platform backed by investors like Y Combinator, General Catalyst, Kulveer Taggar, and more. Prior to Buster, Blake was hire number one at DataSpark and led product development from MVP to 5,000 customers. Blake is originally from South Carolina, and he studied product management and computer science at BYU for 3 years before dropping out to start Buster. And for all the Sandbox students out there listening today, if your parents aren't huge into the whole dropout space, you might want to pause this episode, give it a skip. But for everyone who's actually interested in doing so, Blake is going to be the man to talk about just that story. We're going to dive into, obviously, Buster, his current startup that is just absolutely killing it right now, his experience throughout Y Combinator and raising fundraising. And we're also going to talk about his early struggles throughout Sandbox, forming teams, ideation, working on a different company, and eventually getting rid of that company. So with that being said, guys, we're super pleased to have him with us. Let's jump into the episode. Blake, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
So you mentioned you've done a lot of like interviews and random stuff for Sandbox and different platforms, but you've never done like a straight up podcast before. So I'm happy to be your first one. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, man. Never done a podcast before. Let's do it. It'll be fun.
Yeah. So I want to start off your journey, especially for all the Sandbox students out there. For anyone who's not listening, just one of our young entrepreneurs here on the Get Over Yourself podcast. I want to hear about your journey working on a business throughout college. And I know it was pretty unique because we had the Sandbox experience. Sure. And if you guys missed all of our previous episodes about this, Sandbox, it's a program at BYU, and it's actually expanding to other campuses now where you get college credit to work on a software startup. So if you guys are still younger and you're looking for a great university to do exactly that, work on a business while you get school credits, consider going to BYU or any of the Sandbox partner schools. But did you ever have any experience of, hey, I want to own my own business before Sandbox, or what was kind of your mentality as a young entrepreneur?
Sure, yeah. Growing up, I was pretty entrepreneurial. Like my whole life, I've been very just an independent person, okay. Very go get 'em, and you know, if I wanted something, I was going to make it happen. And so whether that was through, you know, my parents, from when I was a really little kid, never really wanted to give me anything. They wanted me to work for anything that I ever wanted. And so that really like created a sense of like independence and like I can do anything that I set my mind to from like a really young age. And so all growing up, I felt that way. Something else that was really important to me was like family and people that matter most. And so when I got to college, I was kind of not sure if I actually wanted to be an entrepreneur. I would talk to other entrepreneurs and they're like, you know, your family takes a backseat for a lot of the journey. And that always rubbed me wrong. Not in the sense of like, you need to have work-life balance. I don't know if work-life balance really exists in a startup. But I think both things can be equally important, and the things that matter most can still matter most. And you can be really present in everything that you do. Mm-hmm. And so I came to BYU and I was pre-med, and my dad was a dentist, you know, works like 30 hours a week, makes great money. He's always with his family. And so I was like, I think I might want to do that. But I just like wasn't excited about it at all. And so I had an experience where it just kind of like hit me like a sack of bricks, and it was like overwhelming and very clear. And it was just like, you need to look at tech. And so that night I went back to my apartment and I changed my major to CS my major to CS, and I had no clue what I was doing. And I hopped into CS 142 and just started learning about tech. I started meeting with different founders. And then one of the people that I met that I really clicked with was Scott Evanson.
Yep.
So
what a great guy.
Yeah. I love Scott, man. So Scott was speaking at BYU, and he was at a lecture series where they would bring in a lot of like successful entrepreneurs, and these entrepreneurs would always talk about like, you know, humble brags, or, you know, I'm so great. Let me give you this amazing advice, and then, you know, give you all my wisdom and whatever. And Scott came in, and his whole lecture was just on like, if you focus on the things that really matter and you just work your butt off, like you are going to be incredibly successful, but not just successful from in a career sense, but you'll be happy.
Uh-huh.
Like you'll find happiness in life.
Did he drop any Marcus Aurelius quotes?
I'm sure he did.
That man is obsessed. I feel like every time I talk to him, he's like edging back to something like
I'm
that.
sure he did, yeah. But after he did that lecture, I reached out to him, and I was just a freshman at BYU at this point. I think this is before Sandbox even existed, right? And I was like, hey man, the things that you talked about really resonated with me. They've been on my mind a ton lately, and I've been thinking about like the things that matter most while you are pursuing a career as an entrepreneur. And I'm really interested in tech now. I just changed my major. And so I started meeting with Scott, and Scott hired me. So Scott was working on a startup called DataSpark at the time, and he hired me as like hire number one outside of the co-founders there.
And were you a software engineer? Were you doing more product management?
So
'Cause I know you split your majors there.
yeah, I worked for him for free. I was an intern, and
Okay.
I was doing like everything.
Okay.
I actually didn't major in CS, so I started the CS major, and I was like, man, this is not excite me. I don't love these classes. I don't love what I'm doing, and so I swapped to the product track, the sandbox track, right,
Mhm.
the strategy track, and then I minored in CS. But working at DataSpark, I was doing like everything. Like I was all over the place, and I really didn't know much about software engineering, about computer science. I was just starting to learn these things, and so when I started working with Scott, I was doing like customer outreach and building decks and
Just
like
literally anything.
anything he would ask me to do,
Yeah.
I would just do it, and I would like pour an insane amount of time into it to like knock it out of the park.
I want to highlight this too. And I'm kind of split down the middle. Maybe you're different because you've actually done this situation. I'm a firm believer in if you're presented with an opportunity, like working an internship. Sometimes it could be tough if you're saying I'll do this, but I'm not going to get paid.
Sure.
But I think if you find the right mentor who's actually going to guide you through,
Sure.
and it's not just going to say, hey, go and do my busy work, but I'm going to actually help you and progress your career and your future if you come and do this with me,
Yeah.
like Scott did for you. I feel like that's the balance. So I would never suggest to somebody go and work for free unless you could actually be close to somebody you want to mold your life after.
Yeah, and that's one of the amazing things about startups, right? Like startups literally do not care what experience you have.
Just come and help.
All they care is if you can actually deliver incredible results.
Yep.
Right. And it doesn't matter, you know, where you worked, what you've done, what your experience is, how much you don't know yet. And so when I showed up, I was like, the team was awesome. So Scott and his brother had already founded Rhino Labs and sold that for millions of dollars, right? And then his other co-founder, the CEO of DataSpark, was like an ex-Amazon executive, really awesome guy.
They had a good idea of what they were doing.
Yeah, oh yeah, they were amazing mentors, and it was literally just like them three, and then they'd like hired some contracted workers to help them do things like all over the world. And so I hopped in and just started like picking up whatever they would give me. And over time, they would give me more and more and more until I was like legitimately doing product things. The other cool thing was they knew that I wanted to like pursue a career in tech, and so they were also very aware of what I wanted to work on. So at first, it was we're just going to give you stuff and see how this goes. And then when they started to realize like, hey, Blake can actually do incredible work, and whenever we give him a task, he's going to kill it. And he has certain skill sets that are really complementary to building software. And so as we went through that process, I was there for about a year and a half, and I ended up like leading complete development cycles and leading software engineering teams and design teams, right? And all these different things to build products for DataSpark and bring them to the market. I worked really closely with customers. I did webinars. I'd go to trade shows with the CEO. Like I did all sorts of different things, every hat under the sun that you could think of. And so I was a bootstrap startup, and it was a blast. It was awesome. And it really like set me up to know like I want to do this, right? I definitely want to do this. And then being like mentored by Scott and being with Scott that whole time, you know, I had gotten to know his wife. I got to know his kids. Like he invites me to go mountain biking with him and his buddies. Like just seeing his life and the way he lives his life, it really impressed me.
Yeah.
And again, excited me.
I went to the exact same lecture series where he came in and spoke.
Cool.
Obviously different years, but he came in and spoke, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You go in, you have all these different entrepreneurs, and to their own benefit. I mean, they are successful. They obviously have something that they should be teaching you. But like you mentioned, a lot of times they'll come in and they'll humble brag. And they'll get their message across. A lot of times it's still great connections, it's still great information.
Sure.
But there was a difference when Scott came in and talked in this lecture series. He's a lot more soft spoken. Scott is not a loud person whatsoever. He's very soft spoken. He gets his point across at a very simple base. I think we got out of class like 15, 20 minutes early that day because he's like, that's what I got to tell you today.
Love it.
And so I walked up to him, not as far as you went where you ended up working and stuff for him, but my earliest connection, I kind of knew a little bit about Sandbox, but part of his presentation that day, he talked about his business, about being an entrepreneur. Then he kind of threw in the plug for Sandbox. That's when he had kind of started and he was working full force with it. And so I walked up afterwards and I was like, hey, I'd love more information. This sounds exactly like something I'd be interested in. Ended up connecting with him, did a couple meetings. He came on the podcast a long time ago. So guys, make sure to go check out that episode if you want to know more about this amazing Scott guy we've been talking about.
Yeah, he'd be a great guest for the show. I bet that was a good episode.
Yeah, it was super fun. And he dropped more Marcus Aurelius quotes on this. So, but yeah, and I just remember he was the nicest guy. He didn't know me. He owed me nothing, but he's still willing to take the time to actually help one BYU student.
100%.
So what was it like having him as a mentor very early on for at the time when you guys were forming your team, early ideation, and then eventually creating leftovers in your Sandbox experience?
Yeah. It was awesome. Sandbox was a great opportunity. When I found out about Sandbox, I was like 100%, I'm going to do that. It's a no-brainer. And started getting lunch with different people in the upcoming cohort. So they did like the hackathon and they admit you to the program. And
you were coming in as a product manager, right?
I was coming in as a product manager.
Okay. And so guys, how it breaks down is there's typically three roles in Sandbox. There's a designer, there's a product manager, and then there's a software engineer. Teams will obviously mix and match that a little bit, maybe a couple more engineers, a couple PMs, a couple designers. Typically, teams are no bigger than 3 to 4 students, but that's kind of the general breakdown. So you came in as a product manager. That's what I did as well. Cool. So continue from there.
Yeah. I just started to try to get lunch and meet people in the cohort. So this was like really early Sandbox still. Like it was still a pretty experimental concept.
Yep.
And they were trying, I feel like every cohort they go through, it's just like it is a product.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like they're totally iterating through what works and what doesn't
They're practicing what they're preaching. Yeah, that's for sure.
100%. And they didn't do much around like getting to know anybody else in the cohort. And so I was like, well, cool. That's kind of an advantage to me because I can go through and I can find the best people in Sandbox. And I can try and team up with them and build an awesome team. And so I started getting lunch with a bunch of different people and just trying to get to know people. One that I really clicked with and really liked was Spencer Bartholomew. Incredible engineer, incredible guy, just like such a genuine dude. And so we started working on a Chrome extension together just to see how we liked working together. Another one that I got lunch with was Dallin Bentley, who's my co-founder now, and really got along with Dallin. Dallin was in the IS program, so more focused on back end. He had like went above and beyond to actually get real world experience in a way that most IS majors don't.
Okay.
So,
what do you mean by that?
Like he had gone out and gotten like legit software engineering jobs.
Okay.
And he'd been working those jobs. He'd been doing all sorts of different things. Like he went and worked at Principal Financial Group for a long time, doing a lot of back end work for them, and a lot of DevSecOps for them. And then he also went and did like some different crypto projects for different funds here in Utah, VC funds. And so he'd had a lot of really interesting experience, and a lot of IS majors are just more like, I just want some technical expertise so I can go be a business manager, right? Dallin was like a legit engineer.
Go get the corporate job at Walmart,
exactly,
or one of these major ones that come and recruit out of BYU.
And so Dallin like was really invested in software engineering, and he was a really good software engineer, but he also did have an excellent understanding of business, extremely extroverted, extremely personable, like willing to hop in and do anything and everything. Yep. And so not only was he an amazingly talented engineer, he also was willing to do like anything and everything.
Yep.
And good at it. And so that was kind of like the trio. And we started out, we spent the summer talking about ideas, sitting in front of a whiteboard, which I don't recommend anyone do. I think it's a terrible idea in hindsight.
But we've all done it too. Yeah. It's so funny. We've all done it.
It's terrible. That's the one flaw of Sandbox is you get in and you don't have an idea. Right.
And you spend half your experience just, and then like you said, you sit down at the whiteboard, you're coming up with your own pains. Like we came up with a couple products that like for college students, oh, absolutely amazing products.
Sure.
But then what's the issue with the college student? They don't want to pay anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you sit down on the whiteboard and you're just drawing out all your pains inside life, as young founders, we don't have pains.
Yeah,
most of us don't have kids. Most of us don't have mortgages. Most of the people aren't married. Like, there's not very many pains.
And if you don't have an insight, like, you aren't really going to build a venture scale business, right? So if you want to build a lifestyle business, you don't really need an insight. There's lots of great businesses that you can go build, and that's great.
Yeah.
But if you want to build a massive generational company, you have to have an insight that the business like starts on.
Yeah.
Right. And it's impossible to get that by sitting in front of a whiteboard. And so that's the flaw of Sandbox, but we didn't have any insights or ideas. And so we would just try and come up with ideas, work on a little things, tinker with ideas over the summer. And then got to the retreat. So Sandbox does this retreat where they bring the whole cohort out.
You know, they canceled that now, right?
Oh yeah. Did they cancel it?
It's done. It's kind of sad. Once again, though, they're ideating. They're improving on it.
This was a terrible idea.
I don't know that any of the teams formed at our retreat last year. I don't know if any of them stuck.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
I think that's a pretty common trend that they'll continue to see. But yeah, so we went to the retreat and we were basically like, okay, we've been messing around with ideas for a couple of months. We're going to pick the least terrible idea and we're just going to start building something, which is what you should do from the beginning. You shouldn't even spend months sitting in front of a whiteboard. You should just pick your least terrible idea and start building something or something that's interesting to you or whatever it is. And so that's what we did. We started working on leftovers. The whole concept was essentially an app where restaurants can go and they can list all their leftover food at the end of the day for 50% off. And then we flash sell it to them by sending out a notification to all the users on the app, and all the consumers in the area get a notification. Hey, this local restaurant is selling all of their food for half off. If you want to get it, you can buy it in the app and then go pick it up.
Yep.
And so we did
cool
that.
Concept.
Yeah.
Very cool concept.
Yeah,
especially in a college town like this.
Yeah. And the main idea came from, there's a company in Europe that was doing something similar. And so we were like, okay, they're doing this in Europe. They were doing things where they just like throw all the food in one bag. And like you can't buy individualized items. You can't just buy a burger. Like you don't know what you're getting. It's just
you kind of just get it. Yeah.
And so we're like, it'd be cool if you could like actually post up a menu and like list items. And so that's kind of like what we did and how we were different or whatever. And so, and they were also in Europe at the time. Now they're growing in the US, but we're like, this is great. We're in a college town. It's a perfect place to try this. And so we basically threw up a Squarespace site. We went and we found a local college guy that runs a restaurant, Jimmy. So he ran Bun Boys, right? And we walked into Bun Boys and we said, hey, Jimmy, do you have a problem with leftover food? Yeah, because they do a ton of prep. And then if they don't sell their bao buns, they throw them out at the end of the night. We're like, great. We want to help you see if we can sell them at the end of the night. We're going to keep a third of the revenue that we generate. You have to list it at half off. And then we'll give you everything else. And we're basically going to turn what you would be throwing away into, something that can help you recoup some of your lost costs.
And I got a picture. There can't be much pushback with something like that. That's a good offering because if they're going to throw it away anyways, they might as well say, yeah, sure, go for it. I mean, if you can make me a couple extra bucks, that's great.
Yeah, it's a pretty good offer. The only caveat is that you could potentially be cannibalizing their customer base, right? So
if they wait till the end of the night.
Exactly.
They've kind of switched around now, but we can talk about that later.
Exactly. And so, but then if you don't do that, then you end up becoming Groupon.
Yeah.
You're essentially Groupon, right?
Yeah.
And if you research a case study on Groupon didn't go so well for investors and stakeholders because it absolutely tanked. They were cannibalizing local business customers. And so that is one issue with the business. But that isn't the reason that we broke up. We built that business. The original MVP was literally a Squarespace site. We were in the back of the kitchen with Jimmy at Bum Boys, and he would tell us what the quantities were that they had left over. We'd literally manually put them on the Squarespace site, and then we would post it in Facebook groups.
And like local Provo, or
whatever Facebook groups we could find.
Yeah. I'm assuming you got kicked out of a lot of them.
I can't even remember. It was
Facebook groups are the most annoying thing to deal with as a business owner.
You gotta play it smooth. Like you can't be like soliciting in them, right? Like it's almost like we would also do things where you can like post like marketplace listings.
There you go.
Right. And throw those out. And depending on the group, some of them were totally okay with it. But yeah, that was the original like test, and we sold out Jimmy in like minutes, like super fast.
So and you got a lot of people going to the website even.
Yeah, just from Facebook groups. And so we were like, okay, there's something here. We built a legit website. We started building an app. We started getting a couple more restaurants.
And what was your pitch to the restaurants early on? How would you go? Would you just pull up and say, "Hey, we made this. Would you guys be interested?" Was it more of like calling in? Tell us a little bit about your sales process.
It was almost all in person.
Okay.
Calling was like a total waste of time. Like,
get to some front desk person.
Yeah. If it's the only time that some kind of like outreach would work is if it was like a franchise, because they're actually like business operators. Local mom and pop shops are just like literally in the store, and they're not really like operators. And so we would just walk in and talk to them. Or you can a little hack for anyone that's doing like SMB sales is you can for like local retail, you can basically go to the library and get a list of like all of the LLCs. And I think you can actually get it online now. You have to ask Austin at Leverage Labs because they've done this for some of their sales stuff. But you can get this list, and it's basically every LLC in your area.
That's awesome.
And you can just look up the name of the business, and then it has the owner's name. And so everyone that works at a mom and pop shop knows who the owner is.
Yeah.
And so if you call and you just say, "Hey, this is Blake. I'm calling to see if Greg's there," they will 1000% pass you on to him. Like,
that's a good hack right there. Every time. Show that. That's great. I've never heard that before.
Every time they'll pass you on because it's their boss. And they don't ask what you're calling about. They just like hear, oh, someone knows who Greg is, so I'm going to pass them on to
Greg.
That is
awesome. I'm going to try that. Come back and report. I'll let you guys know on the podcast how that works, but I guess they can try it too.
Yeah. So that's a little like a SMB hack if you're trying to sell to local retail shops. But most of the playbooks for people that are selling to retail shops, they're going on foot and they're going in person. And that's what we did for most of it. The pitch was essentially, you can recoup sunk costs, and you can also get new foot traffic into your store. We have a growing list of like 7,000 users in your area. You know, a lot of them have not been to your place before, and so they'll come because you're giving a huge discount and they feel like they're helping the environment by preventing food waste.
Yeah. And I've been to some of these shops now that it's listed on Savor. I don't think I ever used it back when it was on Leftovers, but I've been to some of the shops as it's rebranded.
That you never would have gone to, right?
I would have never gone to, didn't know they existed.
So that's part of the pitch. It's almost like a marketing tool for them, right? And so that's a much more solid pitch than that was more exciting to most people, was like, oh, more foot traffic in my store. Like, people want to do good and not waste things, but most people,
at the end of the day, they also want new customers.
They're running a business. They care less about food waste than they do about that's just the reality. They care more about getting customers in the door than food waste.
So let me ask you this specifically with the early sales as well. You would pull up to these restaurants. I'm assuming you didn't have an appointment. You kind of just showed up. You presented it. How did you get to the main head honcho? I'm assuming the owner of the business wasn't always there. Maybe for restaurants, they were a little bit more than a typical business. But how did you get past that waiter at the very beginning who would seat you to your table, or just the person at the register who's taking your order, to actually talking to the boss?
Usually they're really busy. Well, it depends. If you can go in at a time when they're dead, like, and it's not a peak at business hour, then you can have really great luck because they're not doing anything. A lot of times they are busy. And so if you can just get some inkling of a pitch to them, you can usually schedule a time to come back. So that was really common strategy, to schedule a time to come back. I know another one that this doesn't work, but it just shows how creative you can get. This doesn't work for all businesses. It only works for barbershops. But Austin at Leverage Labs, I went and got dinner with him in San Francisco a couple of months ago. And I was like, dude, you're looking good, man. Like, you've got like this, you're super faded.
Is he getting a barber, or is he getting a haircut every time?
Like 10 haircuts a day. He would go from barbershop to barbershop, and he'd sit down and he'd say, hey, if you give me a haircut, can I pitch you on a software product? And they'd say, yeah. And so they'd sit down and they would like fade up his sides.
But it was like a millimeter time every day.
Oh, and gosh. So he would go and he would do that. And I mean, he would pitch them and he would close tons of barbershops.
I love that.
There's just like, with us especially, you can get super creative, but it is so much manual, like pounding the pavement and getting out there.
Yeah, we've noticed that too with it, with interval specifically when we're reaching out to these people. We've tried methods like that. Like, we sell our product. Sometimes it's dentists. There's a lot of industries we hit, but just the other day when Connor was going to get his teeth cleaned, I was like, all right, you got to do it in a fun way this time to try and like switch it up a little bit. As he started poking prod in your mouth, that's when you got to start pitching him. And so he does it. It was just the funniest thing. You had a fun conversation, but yeah, there are a lot of little techniques, and I think for every business it's going to be slightly different. But if you can get in there and just do something out of the norm, that's one thing I've noticed heavily against, as we've done typical cold calling, just rolling up on businesses and immediately trying to pitch them. Like, a lot of these strategies, I mean, it works the same for us. Whenever I get a message in my LinkedIn inbox for somebody trying to sell me something, I don't really care. I'll delete the message. So I think if we, as we're trying to sell our early products, try and sell in a way that is completely different from the norm that actually stands out, you might just get a customer just because they think it's funny or just because they think it's a unique way of twisting it.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know. That's a great strategy. I like that.
Cool.
I'll have to hype up Boston for that.
Yeah.
So ultimately, to fast forward a little bit so we can get into Buster, leftovers, tell us why you guys ended up disbanding, why you ended up selling it off. And that's super cool that you guys did get an early sell.
Sure. Yeah, it wasn't an acquisition that would excite like an investor, but to a couple, undergrads that hadn't taken any
Yeah,
investment.
for a few months worth of work. That's great.
It was exciting. So, but yeah, we did wind it down, and we worked on it for, I'm trying to remember, I think it was like 5-6 months. And we'd scaled it, nothing crazy, but it was doing okay. But we did start to like top out. We would notice like there's a huge influx of sales when you first bring on a restaurant, right? And then over time it drops off pretty dramatically.
Mhm.
And then they start to struggle to actually like sell out their leftover food at the end of the day. It just loses the buzz and the hype. And so there are a lot of reasons for that. But so there were some things with the business that we were like, is this something that we really want to scale? Dallin and I especially really wanted to build a venture scale business. We wanted to build a massive generational company. We also really like technical products. And so building something technical was exciting to us, and Leftovers was not a technical product at all.
Pretty simple once you get it out there.
So yeah, exactly. And so we weren't like super passionate about it. But the biggest reason and the main reason I think we would have kept going at it, but the biggest reason was totally like team dynamics. And so like I said, Spencer is one of the most incredible engineers. He's an incredible guy. But it got to the point where just making like simple decisions was getting really difficult across our team. And so it got to the point where it was like, hey, this isn't going to work out from a co-founder perspective. And the team dynamic was getting so complicated and so stressful. It was making running the business miserable. It was making it really hard to do.
So let me pick and prod on that a little bit. For all the Sandbox listeners out there and for everyone else, just these young entrepreneurs who are starting their business, the co-founder, finding your early partners, your early hires, it is very difficult because you want somebody who's in it for the long ride.
Yeah.
You want somebody who's going to work just as hard, if not harder than you. You want these early people who are just going to put all of their time, effort, money, everything into this business because they believe in it.
Yeah.
And so dig it a little bit deeper. Why wasn't it working out? What were the conversations you were having that just were kind of red flags where all of you were like, maybe this partnership isn't going to last?
Yeah, it's finding a co-founder is arguably the hardest and most important thing that you can do at the beginning of a business. Like not much else matters. And unless you're going to go out as a solo founder, but like that is like the typical YC advice is like, if your company fails, it's going to be because of a co-founder issue. Like that is the biggest killer of startups.
That's crazy.
And so, because it's really hard, like you are spending more time with these people than your spouse. You are pouring an insane amount of energy into it.
Yep.
Right. And if there's any, like I talk to Sandbox founders sometimes that ask for advice, and they'll talk about like equity splits or something. Right. And I'm like, listen, do you want to build a really big company? Because if you do, you're going to be working on it for the next 10 to 20 years.
And your equity is going to come.
And
it's going to come. You're going to make a good payday.
You're going to make a good payday. But like the person that you're talking about being your co-founder, if you aren't excited, like if you are hesitant to give them half of your company, or if you're three, splitting it into thirds, like why are you starting a company with that person? Yep. And you're going to be working on it for the next 15 to 20 years, because it's a startup is 100% about execution, right? So whether you came up with the idea or you wrote the first lines of code, like it literally doesn't matter, because whether you're 1 month in or a year in or 2 years in, you've got a long way to go, a really long way to go. And the person that you want to be the co-founder that is like literally equal with you and running the company and the face of the company with you, you need to feel so incredibly confident in them. And like, it is a no-brainer that they are your co-founder. And so I think that's really important. As far as the team dynamic was, like, it was just getting complicated to make decisions because there were just really clear disagreements in the way that Spencer would think about things and the way that specifically I would think about things. and Dallin was caught somewhere in the middle.
Just being tugged back and forth between both of you.
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, Spencer is brilliant. Like, yeah, just absolutely brilliant. But we just totally disagreed on a lot of key things about the business. Strategical decisions, all the way down to really simple decisions.
Just enough where picking and prodding was just turning into little brothels between each other.
And it became more apparent over time, right? It's like any kind of new relationship, you go through like a honeymoon phase, right? And so over time it became more apparent, and we became more aware of it, and it got to the point where we had to sit down and talk about it and just say like, hey, this isn't going to work. Like,
tell us about that conversation. That's a tough conversation to have.
Yeah.
And it's one that especially Sandbox students need to hear, because for the majority, you're going to be switching up your team a lot.
Yeah, 100%. It's really hard. Like, we built something together for 6 months, and we were really good friends. Like, we'd go camping together.
You guys were on each other's weddings or something.
We went to Spencer's wedding.
Yeah.
Like, and like I said, Spencer's an incredible guy, and I love Spencer to death. But just running a business together, like, we're not getting along, and that's both ways. Like, I'm prideful and arrogant about a lot of things, right? And Spencer's prideful and arrogant about a lot of things too. And so when those things would rub together, it was a mess. It was a mess. And it was really hard to make decisions and move forward. And when it really became a problem is when it gets to the point where you feel like you can't express your thoughts and opinions, right? And I think we were both feeling that. Like, it was getting to the point where it was
if you say something, it's just going to completely rub them the
wrong
way.
Like, if I bring up a simple thing or I made a simple decision, is that going to cause a huge problem, right? Or is this going to be something that we have to talk about for 30 minutes? And so I think there was a little bit of a lack of trust as well. And so those things just made it really difficult. And the conversation was essentially, like, we were all aware of it at that point. And it was just a candid conversation. It was painful, obviously. But it was good. It was healthy. It was what needed to happen. I've never seen Dallin so stressed, like, in my entire life, and we've done a lot of crazy stuff together since then. But I think he was more stressed going into that conversation than anything else I've ever seen. And because it's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. Well, let's push past this a little bit. Leftovers is a great company. You guys ended up selling it. You're still all friends to this day. Just as far as a business partnership, didn't work out. Now let's jump over. You and Dallin stuck together. You went back to the drawing boards. Leftovers isn't the thing anymore. Where'd you guys come up with Buster? Tell us what Buster is, what you guys are transitioning to, and kind of your experience with it so far.
Yeah, we had customers when we were working on Leftovers that wanted to get different kinds of reports.
These are restaurants still.
Restaurants, yeah. Okay. They just wanted to see, like, hey, like, basic things like, what are my sales? You know, how many people
purely
are
through
coming
the
in
app, or
yeah, they wanted to see it through the app or whatever, but they were asking us for some kind of analytics offering as part of the platform that we were selling them, right? And so we started while we were working on Leftovers, we started doing that manually. So Dallin would go run some SQL queries on the database, get back the information that we needed for each individual customer.
And what, just text it out to them?
We'd literally write up an email and just send them a weekly email. And so when we wound down Leftovers, we had some really ideas. This is a little bit after ChatGPT had exploded. LLMs were a huge thing. And we kind of had some ideas around, like, text to SQL was starting to become a really prominent, like, concept with LLMs. The idea that an LLM can write SQL to go and query a database and then retrieve information for you and give that back to you. So you can literally say in the Leftover sense, you could say, hey, which days of the week am I selling the most quantity?
In between what hours?
And between, like, you can literally say whatever you want in natural language and get back data. And so we were like, this is really interesting. Let's just, like, build a POC and start messing with this. We went and we talked to Nate Sanders, who at the time was starting a company in Utah called Artifact. Nate is one of, like, the leading, like, AI minds in Utah. I think most people that you would talk to in tech in Utah would agree that, like, he is pretty much at the cutting edge of what's going on with LLMs and AI. And so we went and we talked to him, and he was building, like this new AI platform. It was integrating LLMs into it. And he was like, oh my gosh, text to SQL is so complicated. Like translating a natural language request into SQL that can accurately and reliably query my database is such a problem. And he said, if you can build me an API that can do that, I will pay you right now to go and try and build it. And so we were like, well, that sounds great.
I guess we're doing it.
Yeah, like
First customer,
we
baby.
started doing a POC, and we'd gone to him because we were like, hey, you know a ton about how this stuff works. These are the strategies that we're using right now. This is how we're thinking about it. This is how we've built our POC. What are your thoughts? And
Did it scare you that he came back and said, like, this is going to be so difficult?
it didn't scare us at all. No,
That's good.
I don't
That's
think
good.
Dallin and I have ever been scared of things like that. Maybe for better or for worse. But
That's good. You guys may be more brave than Connor. When a customer brings up like a big point for us, sometimes we just look at each other in the eyes and go, well, here we go.
I think Dallin and I look at it as an opportunity, right? If it's so difficult to pull off, then like there's a real opportunity there.
That's true.
And maybe at some point it's actually impossible. But the task is fun, right?
There you go.
And so yeah, we took his money. He wired us $2,500 that day, just a small deposit, and he said, like, here's my database, here's my credentials, build it. And we were like, holy crap, this is insane, because he just gave us money. And even if he didn't give us money, giving us database credentials is like a huge deal.
Oh yeah,
it's like giving us keys to the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so we're like, this is like a really real problem that people are facing and they want to solve. And so that's where it started. And we went down the Texas SQL rabbit hole. And from there, it's been a crazy journey of pivots and trying to figure out how to get this to work reliably.
Yep.
Where there is an opportunity in the market for someone that really does want something like this, and who has the resources to actually like implement this in a product, an org, whatever it might be.
And so after you guys started working on it, obviously you figured it out, and you guys are still working on it to this day. Where did you go about finding your earliest customers besides just the initial, hey, go and build this for me?
Yeah,
that's another thing. I want to throw this out there. Sometimes you'll go and you'll think you found the biggest pain because one person tells you about it.
Right.
In your case, obviously, it was scalable. But we did this on the early days too. We'd go and survey a bunch of businesses. They would give us one pain point that they had, and we'd think, okay, this is perfect. We'd start working on the idea before we talk to anyone else, which
Sure.
Don't do that, guys. That is a horrible piece of advice. If you do follow that, don't do it. And we'd go start working on this product, and then we go and try and like bring it out to other people after we had already built nothing grand, but like a tiny MVP. It would waste maybe a week or something, but That's still an entire week that you could have been working on something bigger. We go and present it to other people in the same space even, and they'd be like, this no value for us.
Sure.
And so where'd you guys go about finding your earliest customers besides the one?
We got a good amount of inbound interest, genuinely. So Dallin and I would post about stuff on LinkedIn,
Yep,
on Twitter, whatever it might be. We would go and do like different pitch competitions or whatever it might be. So our second customer, we started getting some people signing up, and that like we were like, okay, these people are interested, but it's not necessarily a fit right now because we don't have like a full-fledged product. Like we need someone that's truly like an early partner that can work with us as we build this. And so that person that like it really fit with was MarketDial. So MarketDial was our second customer, and Morgan is the founder of MarketDial. He heard about what we were doing and said, this is freaking awesome. I would be really interested in using this in our product. So MarketDial is like a retail analytics platform. They help like some of the biggest grocery store brands and retail brands in the US. They help them basically do A/B testing in their stores. So you can test, does this sell well over here versus over here?
Okay.
All sorts of analytics about your store and where things are located.
So they were more wanting it for their customers.
Yeah.
It sounds like. Okay.
Yeah. And so was Nate. So
Okay.
at Artifact, he wanted an API.
He didn't want it for his business. He wanted it for his customers.
He wanted an API that he could integrate into his product and,
Okay.
and use it for his
That
customers.
makes more sense.
And so it was the same thing with Morgan at MarketDial, but he was like, I really don't want to build a UI around this. I don't want to build a user experience. Like it's actually really complicated to build good user experiences around LLM products.
Yeah.
They're really loosey-goosey and nuanced and not super intuitive half the time. And so he was like, if you can build like an embeddable feature that I can literally just plug into my product, right? And all the APIs are like plugged into the skin, and I can just embed it in my product as a React component, as an iframe, whatever it is. I want that.
Yeah.
And so we were like, sweet. And he gave us a little bit of money to go and build that. We started building that. He signed a contract and they started using it. And so he was kind of
And how long after was that from the first sale?
It was pretty soon after.
Okay.
Really soon after. I mean, Buster was still like an API endpoint POC at that point. We hadn't built much, and MarketDial really helped us. We built like that front end component for them so they can like white label it and put it in their application. But we also started learning a lot about like what does implementation look like for a feature like this. And so we started building tooling for like developers so that developers could go in, they could like set up a RAG pipeline, they could like fill it with a bunch of information about the database, they could essentially teach the LLM what it needs to know to be able to do this accurately, and then implement safeguards and guardrails to do it in a secure and reliable way as well. And so we started building all kinds of dev tools around it as well, and started slowly onboarding customers, and we kind of just had a decent amount of inbound interest, just from frequently posting demos, throwing it up in Reddit threads, throwing it on LinkedIn, whatever it might be.
Just kind of anywhere that could potentially get you somebody.
Yeah, and then when we got into YC, we got a lot of inbound interest.
That's awesome. Yeah, tell us, as we're closing up on today's episode, I want to close out with this thought. Buster's obviously going in a great direction. You guys got accepted to Y Combinator. You finished up in San Francisco. You've moved operations back here to Utah.
Yep.
Tell us about your experience. Tell us a little bit about your fundraising ground and where you guys are headed here in the near future.
Oh man, dude, YC was awesome, amazing. So, yeah, we absolutely loved YC. So YC partners, they invest pretty autonomously. So like the partner that backs you is the one that's backing you.
Okay.
So they choose you to fund, and they're the one that funds you. So Jared Freeman was our partner at YC. We worked really closely with him, really closely with a visiting partner. Nate Smith was the former founder of Lever, that recently sold. And so working really closely with them, getting really, tightly knit with this community is so powerful. Like the YC community is just incredibly powerful. And then they also help with fundraising, right? And so we were able to go out and raise our funding round. I think it went relatively well compared to what it would have been without, YC really being a signal to investors. It excited a lot of people and got a lot of people interested in investing in us. And so YC, all in all, was just an incredible experience. Loved living in San Francisco, loved being out there and building there.
Love the $6 gas in the city every week.
That's right.
Just absolutely amazing.
That's right.
That's awesome. Tell us, as we're wrapping up on today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast, what's the future goal with Buster? How much longer do you guys think you're going to continue working on it? Do you want to sell it? Do you want this to be your business for the next 30 years? What direction are you guys headed? How can everyone who's listening today help and find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. We're Dallin and I, we both our goal is to build a generational company. We want to build something that can become, a massive success in the sense of a venture scale business. And so all we really care about is finding product market fit. We're really candid in the fact that we're still searching for that and looking for that.
Which can take years.
Yeah, it is a grind. Like anyone that has kind of wandered through the desert to try and find it can tell you it's such a hard part of the journey, right? And so we're very much in the thick of that. And like I just told you before the pod, like we're pivoting away from, we had this emphasis on like embedded analytics and integrating this tech into your product.
Yeah.
We're pivoting away from that, and we're actually killing some contracts with different customers and moving towards a new approach. We're building like a full-fledged data stack. So you can kind of think of it as like a Supabase as a data stack, where you can just spin up your data stack instantly. And then we have AI workflows integrated throughout the entire stack. So all the way from ETLing your data and unifying it into one data source. We host the data source. It's a headless warehouse. So it's exponentially cheaper than if you were to use something like Snowflake. It's 100x faster. It's using really recent developments in things like Parquet files and Apache Iceberg. And so it's like a new way to query data.
That's awesome.
That's just way cheaper, way faster. And so we have that layer. We're building a transformation layer that uses LLMs to essentially unify your data, manipulate it, and put it into a form so that it's really digestible for LLMs. And it's kind of a tool for your engineering team, your data team to go in and do that really easily and quickly. And then on top of that, we're building a BI tool so you can actually use it in your org and give it to people in your organization. And they can ask natural language questions for data and build their own dashboards and reports using natural language.
It's awesome.
So it's the whole stack.
Awesome. Well, Blake, I appreciate you for joining us on today's episode of the Get Over Yourself podcast. If people want to connect with you on LinkedIn or find out more about Buster, where can they go?
Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter. See Blake Rouse. Happy to connect with anyone.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate it once again, guys. Make sure to tune in next week where we continue our series with Sandbox founders and other young entrepreneurs so we can continue to drive your business as well. With that all being said, we'll see you next time.